Welcome to a presentation on the Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron Twilight Courses and the rules which apply. My name is Howard Elliott. In this session we'll cover some background topics and then look at the courses and the issues which can arise at the pinch points. I'll start with a refresh of some important rules and definitions, where to find useful information and the emergency procedures, and then we'll look at the individual pinch points. Firstly, a reminder of the fundamental rules, as these are the basis for our sport. I won't go into them in detail, as we had covered them in other sessions. Some key things to remember. Always help those in danger. Protest committees generally reward this. Not helping someone in obvious danger may be a breach of the law. Always sail in the spirit of good sportsmanship. If you deliberately breach a rule, if you don't take a penalty when you know you should, if you behave in a reckless fashion, you will fall foul of Rule 2. Rules 3 and 4 are reasonably well known. When you enter an event, you enter into a contract with the organising authority to sail by the rules. It is your decision and your decision alone to race or to continue to race. Corruption is compliance with world sailing policy on gambling. This is not grounds for protest, but is grounds for disciplinary action under World Sailing Regulation 35. Remember, the racing rules of sailing are obligations to keep clear or give room. They do not give you a right to do anything. Keeping boats apart is the core aim of the racing rules, with the desired outcome of avoiding collisions. Rule 14 places a clear obligation on both boats to avoid collisions. It doesn't matter whether you are the keep clear boat or the right-of-way boat. Avoiding collisions applies to both. If there is a collision, then both boats will need to prove to the protest committee that they tried to avoid a collision. Rule 2 is about sportsmanship and fair play. Sportsmanship is described as recognised principles of sportsmanship. This means the term takes on the generally accepted meaning. Also, in the basic principles, sportsmanship includes that a fundamental principle of sportsmanship is that when competitors break a rule, they will promptly take a penalty, which may be to retire. A common breach of sportsmanship in self-policing sports is when a competitor knows they have broken a rule, but does not take a penalty. Rule 2 is often used in this situation. Another use of Rule 2 is reckless behaviour. Where reckless behaviour results in damage or injury, there is a possibility that said behaviour may be subject to criminal charges. Before you go on the water, you must read and be familiar with the sailing instructions. Remember, this is where all the good stuff is hidden. Make sure you check for amendments. The sailing office tries to let you know by email, but this is not a requirement under the rules. Please check the website. Key information you can find in the sailing instructions includes the course descriptions and chartlets, vital to knowing what the courses are. For the Twilights, the courses are fixed, always around the same marks in the same direction. The only variation on this is when the courses are shortened. Mark descriptions. There are 3 types of marks you will encounter in a Twilight. These are laid or inflatable marks, usually orange cylinders, yellow cylindrical fixed marks, known as YA marks, or Australian sailing marks, naval mooring marks referred to as N1, N2 and N3. These are large white floating drums. The Twilights use a pursuit or handicap starting system, where the slower boats start first, followed by the faster boats. The objectives of this system is to reduce the number of boats on the starting line at any one time, and have boats in the same division finish close to each other. I will describe the start in more detail later. Your start time will be published on the website. Note that Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron uses GPS time as its reference time. Please make sure you read the Harbour Control Regulations appendix and understand the exclusion zone around ferries and other commercial traffic. Breaches of the exclusion zones can result in disqualification. There's lots of other useful information, including the emergency procedures. Let's discuss them now. The emergency procedures are in Appendix 7. I recommend that everyone becomes familiar with the emergency procedures. When a situation arises, it is vital that everyone involved knows the process. The process has been executed a few times already. It works reasonably well. In summary, here are the key components. Check yourself and your crew first. Make sure everyone is safe and uninjured. Do this before assisting others. For serious incidents where serious or life-threatening injury has occurred, call 000 as soon as practical. For major, non-life-threatening incidents, typically where major damage has occurred, carry out a Mayday or PAN call on Channel 16. For other incidents, contact Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron on VHF Channel 73 or 9955 7171. Always be mindful of your closest extraction points if an ambulance is required. For the Twilight Courses, the closest extraction points are Rose Bay Wharf and Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron. Here are some other useful things from the sailing instructions. Sailing Instruction 1.4 requires you to have an operating VHF radio. This radio must be tuned to VHF Channel 73. The radio must be switched on at all times and tuned to Channel 73. Don't be cute. As far as the apprentice panel is concerned, turned on means turned on and audible from the cockpit while sailing. Also, if you don't have a VHF radio operator's license, you should get one. Sailing Instruction 9 details the areas which are deemed obstructions. We covered obstructions in the rounding marks and obstruction session. In summary, these are cardinal marks. Boat shall not sail within the area bounded by cardinal marks. Moorings. Boat shall not sail within mooring areas. Shark Island. Boat shall not sail between the AS Shark Island mark and Shark Island, or between the island and the Shark Island light, which is north of Shark Island. Garden Island and Chowder Bay. Boats shall not sail within the yellow markers in the vicinity of Garden Island or near the naval wharf in Chowder Bay. There will be no recall signals. It is your responsibility to ensure you are not OCS. This is the chartlet which is attached to the sailing instructions. While it is based on a naval map, you should not rely on the distances or sizes shown. In particular, the location of the AS marks. I've drawn the start-finish line area at Kirribilli for reference. I've also removed some marks which normally appear on the chartlet because they are not marks for social races. We're going to consider the Twilight courses most often sailed. That is, I'm specifically excluding the shortened courses. These courses are sailed on Sunday, Tuesday and Friday races. To make life difficult, these races, especially Friday, include multiple mixed divisions. By mixed, I mean mixed boat sizes, speeds, competitiveness and abilities. And that's just for Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron. To complicate the picture, there are multiple clubs racing in the same race area, but on different courses. Fortunately, the clubs do speak to each other regularly, so there are no marks which are rounded in opposite directions. This slide shows the Friday Twilight Division 1 course. This is the longest squadron course. Now let me add the other divisions. With the other divisions added, the courses are still reasonably similar. The obvious differences are the northern rounding mark at Chowder Bay and the Point Piper mark used by the One Design fleets. The arrow shows the outbound leg to the N2 mark. Finally, let's add the other clubs. The red lines show the interaction of the other clubs' courses. The two main interactions are with the Cruising Yacht Club and Sydney Amateurs. Here you can see the key interactions at the N2 mark and around Shark Island. These are the two primary pinch points. I'm going to look at these pinch points in more detail. We will look at the courses from two perspectives, a northeasterly wind and a southeasterly wind. These are the two most common prevailing winds. First, though, is the start. On a Friday, the starting line is between a laid mark and a committee vessel. On a Sunday and Tuesday, the starting line is between two laid marks. Sailing Instruction 12 has the details of the starting procedure. You must not start earlier than your published time. You must not sail through the starting line in either direction unless you are starting. You must keep clear of the starting line unless you are approaching the starting line to start. Now let's look at the two scenarios. The first is an upwind start, typically in the south to southeasterly winds. The second is the reaching start, in north to northeasterly winds. This is the upwind start scenario. There are two areas of interest, the boat end and the pin end. I'll let the scenario run and then talk about the start at each end. While the scenario is running, there are two key things to remember. Firstly, Rule 18 does not apply to starting mark. This means an inside boat is not entitled to mark room. Secondly, the key rule at the start is Rule 11. A windward boat shall keep clear of a leeward boat. Let's discuss the boat end first. As you can see in the diagram, there are three boats approaching the start line at the boat end: green, blue and yellow. Blue is sailing a close hauled course and is on the lay line for the committee boat. Green is to windward of blue and is required by Rule 11 to keep clear of blue. This situation is often referred to as barging. Green is not entitled to room and must keep clear of blue. In the situation shown, green should tack to keep clear. Yellow, who is to leeward of blue, is approaching the starting line on a parallel but leeward course to blue. Blue, as windward boat, is required to keep clear of yellow. Blue needs to be very careful here. Yellow is entitled to luff. Yellow is required to give blue room to keep clear. Up to the starting signal, yellow is entitled to luff to head to wind. Yellow is entitled to prevent blue from starting between her and the committee vessel. As I said, blue needs to be very cognizant of yellow. In addition, green also needs to be cognizant of yellow. If yellow does luff, what space green thought there was may disappear very quickly. Green has chosen a very high-risk starting approach. Yellow has chosen the best approach to start at the committee boat end. However, yellow needs to understand that while she is entitled to luff and stop blue and green passing between she and the committee boat, she can only do so while giving blue and green room to keep clear as required by Rule 16. She is also required by Rule 14 to avoid a collision. If it is clear that blue and green are not keeping clear, yellow must avoid them. Her only remedy is to protest. At the pin end, the situation is not too different. Red is sailing a close haul course and is on the lay line for the starting mark. Light blue is to windward of red and is required by Rule 11 to keep clear of red. This is also a barging scenario. Light blue is not entitled to room and must keep clear of red. In the situation shown, light blue should tack to keep clear or sail astern of red. A port tack start, as is being done by red and light blue, carries other dangers. The most common is another boat on starboard tack. A port tack boat is required to keep clear of a starboard tack boat. In the situation shown, both red and light blue are required to keep clear of purple. If necessary, they must tack or pass astern of purple. Similar to yellow at the committee boat end, purple needs to understand that while the port tack boats are required to keep clear, if she alters course, luffs or bears away, she is required by Rule 16 to give the port tack boats room to keep clear. She is also required by Rule 14 to avoid a collision. If it's clear that red and light blue are not keeping clear, purple must avoid them. Her only remedy is to protest. For a more detailed look at the rules which apply for upwind starts, please watch the session on starts. Let's now look at the other common start for twilights, the reaching start. This is the downwind start scenario. I've chosen a port tack reaching start as this is the most common reaching start we encounter at the twilights. Like the upwind start, there are two areas of interest, the windward end and the leeward end. I'll let the scenario run and then talk about the start at each end and in the middle of the line. While the scenario is running, there are three key things to remember. Firstly, Rule 18 does not apply to starting mark. This means an inside boat is not entitled to mark room. Secondly, the key rule at the start is Rule 11. A windward boat shall keep clear of a leeward boat. And finally, a boat clear astern shall keep clear of a boat clear ahead. Let's discuss the leeward end first. This is at mark number 2. Green is windward boat and must keep clear of red. Up to the starting signal, red is entitled to luff head to wind. Green is windward boat must keep clear. If green is unable to keep clear, for example because there is a boat to windward of her, red must cease her luff. Her only remedy is to protest. In many starts we have boats of much different speeds approaching the line to start. In the middle of this line we have purple and grey. Purple is much faster and closing in from behind. The onus is on purple to keep clear. Purple's smart approach would be to pass to leeward. This gives purple the opportunity to luff grey if she needs to. It's worth remembering that there is no proper course before the starting signal. Therefore, purple can establish an overlap from clear astern within 2 boat lengths and is entitled to luff head to wind. Of course, purple is bound by rules 15 and 16 to give grey room to keep clear. Purple needs to be careful not to pass too close to grey, as the most common manoeuvre to keep clear for grey is to luff. This could cause grey's stern to move to leeward. At the windward end, the situation often gets very tense and dangerous. As shown in the scenario, grey and blue are both to windward of yellow. Neither are entitled to mark room. Yellow is entitled to luff head to wind if she wants. As in the upwind scenario, yellow can shut the gate on blue and grey. Blue and grey have no alternative but to keep clear of yellow. However, yellow needs to understand that while she's entitled to luff and stop blue and grey passing between she and the mark, she can only do so while giving blue and grey room to keep clear as required by Rule 16. She is also required by Rule 14 to avoid a collision. If it is clear that blue and grey are not keeping clear, yellow must avoid them. Her only remedy is to protest. Often on the reaching start, we see boats coming from the course side on starboard tack. Their intention is to jibe around the windward mark and start. This is exactly the intention of light blue as shown in this scenario. In this situation, yellow, blue and grey, all on port tack, must keep clear of light blue on starboard tack. It is clear that blue and grey are in a very high risk position. Not only are they required to keep clear of yellow, they are also required to keep clear of light blue. If you intend to start similarly as blue or grey, make sure you consider the situation well in advance. Placing yourself in a position where you can't avoid a collision is a breach of Rule 14. Not considering the situation in advance generally raises the breach to serious and bringing Rules 2 and 69 into consideration. While light blue might think they're about to make a great start, light blue needs to consider the other boats and her obligations under Rule 16. In the situation shown, by position 3, it is likely that if light blue maintained her course, she would pass astern of yellow. However, as soon as light blue commences her jibe, she's altering course and is required by Rule 16 to give the port tack boat, yellow, room to keep clear. To make matters worse for light blue, as soon as her sail passes the centre line of the boat, she becomes overlapped to windward of yellow and is required to keep clear of yellow. Because yellow becomes right-of-way boat through light blue's actions, yellow is not required to initially give light blue room to keep clear. In summary, the starboard tack windward start sounds like a good idea, but it is usually very high risk. In all these scenarios, Rule 14 is paramount and covers all boats. You must avoid a collision. For a more detailed look at the rules which apply for upwind and downwind starts, please watch the session on starts. Now let's move on to the first mark. Now that we have started, the next pinch point is the first rounding mark, N2. Again, 2 scenarios here. Let's look at the northeast wind scenario first. Northeast squadron boats are reaching towards N2 from Kirribilli. They're on port tack. Ammoners boats are also on port tack and reaching down from Athol Bay. The CYC are close hauled, coming from their starting area in Rushcutters Bay, and N2 is not a mark of their course. This is the first scenario approaching N2. Squadron boats are reaching towards N2 from Kirribilli. They're on port tack. Ammoners boats are also on port tack reaching down from Athol Bay, and CYC boats are coming from their starting area in Rushcutters Bay and are close hauled. N2 is not a mark of the course for CYC. I've tried to include all the situations in the same scenario. While it's unlikely to all occur together, it has been known to happen. Rules 11 and 18.2 apply to blue and yellow as they are rounding the same mark. Rule 11 applies between blue and red. Rule 10 applies between blue and green and pink. Rule 18.2 does not apply between blue, red, green and pink. I've stopped the scenario before the mess occurred, so we can talk through the keep clear and give room boats from the perspective of the squadron boat, which is blue. Firstly, yellow is to windward and will be rounding the same mark. Blue must give yellow mark room, as yellow is the inside boat. Blue has to keep clear of red, as blue is the windward boat. This puts blue in a pinch situation. Blue needs to understand that the time to make a decision about how to handle this situation was a few boat lengths back. The other situation involves the starboard tack boats. Note there are two variations. Green is on starboard and will leave N2 to starboard. Pink is on starboard and will leave N2 to port. Blue on port tack is required to keep clear of green on starboard tack. Blue is at risk of having to tack to avoid green. Sailing astern of green is the obvious choice, if there is room. And don't forget about red. Blue as windward boat is required to keep clear of red. Blue may also get around N2 on port tack only to be confronted with pink on starboard tack. Blue on port tack is required to keep clear of pink. Finally, blue must contend with N3, another big mark which hurts when you hit it. N3 ranks as an obstruction. Rules 11, 19 and 20 apply between blue and yellow as they approach the obstruction. Yellow is to keep clear boat, so blue decides which side of N3 she will pass. If blue bears away to leave N3 to port, blue is required as inside boat to give yellow room to also leave N3 to port. My final statement on N2. While you may think other boats have to keep clear of you or give you room, you are not allowed to force your rights. If there is an obvious traffic jam on the mark, and there often is, don't add to the mayhem. Also, for the quicker boats, remember that it was a pursuit start. The boats in front of you are probably slower and less manoeuvrable. Use appropriate tolerances. There's a lot happening on that mark. The second scenario is in a southeast wind. Let's go and have a look at that one now. The second scenario is in a southeast wind. N2 is a windward mark for the boats from Kirribilli and Athol Bay. Again, it is not a mark of the course for the CYCA boats. They just happen to be passing it to starboard tack. Rule 10 applies between blue, green, pink and yellow. Rule 11 applies between green, pink and yellow. Rule 18.2 does not apply between blue and green as they are on opposite tacks at a windward mark. Blue as port tack boat is required to keep clear of everyone. Blue may try and tack to lee bow green, in which case Rule 18.3 does come into play. In a mixed fleece race with multiple clubs, my advice is not to try that manoeuvre. Always remember your tolerances. Let's look at the approaches to the northern marks. While there are three northern marks, LB, BB and CB, CB has the lowest traffic, so I'll concentrate on BB and LB. Much of the rules apply at the CB mark as they do at the other marks. The BB mark sits on the line of the LB mark and presents a couple of problems for all divisions. In a northeast wind, all clubs are approaching the marks from the same direction and are rounding the marks in the same manner. So apart from the traffic, the rules are fairly straightforward. This is a windward mark, so the key rules are Rule 10 applies to boats on opposite tacks. Rule 18.2 applies to boats on the same tack approaching the mark. The outside boat gives the inside boat room to round the mark. Rule 18.3, tacking in the zone, does not apply because the marks are being rounded to starboard. In southeast winds, the marks are leeward marks.
Rule 18.2 applies to boats running the same mark. If BB is not a mark of the course for a division, for example, Squadron Division 1 or CYCA, then a boat is not rounding it and Rule 18.2 does not apply. Now let's have a look at different scenarios. The first scenario is the BB mark in a northeast wind. I won't animate this as the still image shows the situation well. The two blue boats want to round BB and head south. Red and pink want to go past BB and head north. Rule 10 applies between blue and light blue. Rule 11 applies between red and light blue, and blue and pink. Light blue must keep clear of red. To round the mark, the best idea may be to slow down. Both blue and light blue need to be wary of pink. As they round the mark, they'll be on port and pink will be on starboard. Now let's go on to the second scenario. The second scenario shows boats rounding and passing BB in a southeast wind. That is, they're heading towards Manly. Rule 11 applies between all the boats. Red is most windward. Blue and yellow are in vice positions and need to be careful. When blue and green reach the zone, Rule 18.2 will apply between them as they both want to round BB. To complicate things, orange is the leewardmost boat and wants to pass to the south of BB. Yes, there's always someone sailing angles. Blue and green's main problem is orange. Their best strategy is to slow down. Blue and green also need to be aware of their obligations under Rule 16. As they round the mark and are altering course, they have to give red and yellow room to keep clear. Now let's move on to the last scenario.
The last scenario is very messy. This is LB or BB in a nor'easterly breeze. Boats are rounding and have to deal with lots of traffic, and boats approaching the mark on a beat north to round. Purple, blue and yellow are approaching the mark to round to starboard. Green is approaching the mark on starboard tack. Rule 11 applies between purple, blue and yellow before the zone. Rule 18.2 applies between purple, blue and yellow when they reach the zone, and Rule 10 applies between green and purple, blue and yellow. As they approach the mark, yellow as inside boat hails for mark room. Green hails starboard. While purple must keep clear as windward boat, blue is caught in the vice and can only respond as quickly as purple and yellow allow. Green is relatively nice and does not force the entire fleet to tack, although that is not uncommon. Yellow sails head to wind and forces blue to do the same to allow green mark room. And purple bails by taking a quick tack. After rounding the mark on port tack, green, yellow and blue are confronted with starboard tack boats approaching the mark and must keep clear. Rule 11 applies between green, blue and yellow. Yellow as right-of-way boat chooses to sail to windward of orange and luffs blue. This is a very common situation at the LB and BB mark, so take particular care. Now let's move to Shark Island. The Shark Island mark is an AS mark to the east of the eastern cardinal mark. There isn't much room between the AS and the cardinal marks, so if you're the inside boat and you don't have room, bail early. In a northeast wind, the main rules are 11 and Rule 18.2. There is typically a lot of traffic, so again, if you're the inside boat and there's not enough room, don't go in. Remember that there's not a lot of water to the west of the mark, so bail out early. In a southeast wind, Shark Island is a windward mark, so Rules 10 apply between boats on opposite tacks and Rules 11 and 18.2 between boats on the same tack. Remember that as Shark Island is a starboard rounding, Rule 18.3 tacking in the zone does not apply. The key issue with Shark Island is that it's a crossover point for the courses. Let's see the courses again at this point. This is a chartlet view again of the marks and the course crossover points. There are two crossover points. The first is at the Shark Island mark itself, and the second later along the last leg. The courses after rounding Shark Island are CYC goes to Point Piper and Rushcutters Bay. Amateurs goes to Point Piper at a heading of about 251 degrees, and then Point Piper to Athol Bay at a heading of 320 degrees. The squadron goes straight to Kirribilli at a heading of about 290 degrees. The main problems occur in the northeast winds. After rounding Shark Island, the boats from the different clubs are initially downwind on different courses. The squadron course to Kirribilli is 40 degrees higher than Amateurs and CYC. Rule 11 is a relevant rule. However, don't always assume the windward boat will understand. In my 20 years of Twilights, I marvel at the lack of understanding of other clubs' courses by some fleets. If you're the leeward boat trying to sail to Kirribilli and the windward boat won't keep clear after you ask them nicely, please note their sail number and report it to our sailing office. A protest would be preferable. The second crossover is after the Amateurs boats have rounded the Point Piper mark and are headed to Athol Bay. Their course is 320 degrees. Squadron boats are to windward on a course of 290 degrees, about a 30 degree course differential. Squadron boats are to windward, amateur boats to leeward on a higher course, almost close hauled, and so Rule 11 applies. In a southeast wind, squadron are to leeward, and so Rule 11 also applies. However, in some cases, the Amateurs boats are on starboard tack, so Rule 10 would apply. Now let's look at the finish lines. On Fridays, the finishes are between the committee vessel and a laid mark. On a Sunday and Tuesday, the finish line is between two laid marks. The definition of finish requires you to cross the finish line from the direction of the last mark. In northeast and southeast winds, the finish is downwind. Consequently, Rule 18 applies between boats at the marks. The outside boat gives the inside boat room to pass the mark. Remember that even if you are on opposite jibes, the outside boat is still required to give the inside boat room to pass. In the rare event that we are sailing in a westerly wind and the finish is a windward finish, Rule 18 applies between boats on the same tack, and Rule 11 applies to boats on opposite tacks. I hope you've enjoyed this session. If there's any questions, please feel free to contact me on this email address or through the sailing office at the squadron. Thank you. See you all out on the water.